Hi, good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing today? Welcome to BLST 103, Black Women in Africa, the Diaspora course. And we're going to be concluding the final group presentation today, Monday, November 21, 2022. So we're going to move right ahead or moving right along. We have Rosalind and Shirley, and then it's going to be followed by Dinick. Rosalind and Shirley, do you have your presentation ready?
Yes, we do. We're going to be
Okay.
doing a discussion.
All right. I only see Rosalind. I don't see your counterpart. All right.
Right there.
Hi, how are you? Go ahead.
So we were talking about battles in women in education and their careers, like later on in life. So women went from having no education, and that battle was fought. But then it went from Black women's education being little to no importance in their relevance and all. Barbara Johns was one of the women I read about. She had a really inspiring quote. It was called Reaching for the Moon. And when I read that quote, it reminded me a lot of like their education, because it was like that for them. They believed it was impossible for them to finally have equal education. It was like reaching for the moon for them, but it was something that they did conquer overall. This time period for education was not for the faint-hearted. Ruby Bridges, she was the first Black child to enter an all-white school, and she had to go through a lot of tests and a lot of loopholes to get into that school. But when she finally did, she was still looked at as not capable enough to do so, to be in a white school, because she was a Black child. In that school, when she was in it, she faced a lot of verbal abuse and minor physical abuse, simply because she was a Black child in an all-white school. We spoke about Susie King Taylor. She fled from slavery and learned for herself. She was the first Black teacher to teach openly to former slaves, and she helped them through their freedom. She helped teach them and how to survive. She helped teach them what they needed for survival. Their education, it was one of the most important things you needed once you came out of slavery. So when you look at, sorry, I lost my place. Women are often left out of history books a lot. You don't hear about women all that much. African Americans are briefly spoken over in history, but African American women are spoken about maybe once or twice, and it's never much of a big deal. It's more just washed over. In one of the books that we read, Generation X, you hear about the pre-colonial Nigerian times. Women were looked at as respected. They were valued, like their opinions were valued. And then you get to post-colonial times, where it's like white men turned it all around. Women were near to the bottom of anyone's shoe. They weren't respected. They were used as housewives or slaves. They were used for men's sexual desires. They didn't know what it was like to be a true woman, because they were told that they were nothing constantly. Now moving forward to art now, or the present, you look at certain neighborhoods, and this is a very controversial topic, but it is true and researched upon. There are neighborhoods that are predominantly white neighborhoods and predominantly Black neighborhoods. And if you look in the education in them, you see that the predominantly Black neighborhoods, the education isn't as good as the predominantly white neighborhoods. They lack um, resources like textbooks and internet. White, predominantly white neighborhood schools have more technology than the mall. And lastly, I want to talk about the movements, the women's rights movements. One of them that is currently happening is Roe v. Wade. And to mix that into education, women are deemed so uneducated in our time now that we aren't even allowed to make medical decisions on our own bodies. Women constantly need to prove that they have the right, that they are educated enough. That's what the battle is. Every battle we go through all ends up in education, because we're deemed uneducated for our own bodies. We're deemed uneducated before to vote. Everything we had to go through, they looked at us as if they looked at women as if we were just nothing and had no brains compared to men. Shirley.
Thank you very much, Rosalind, for your presentation. You certainly gave a lot of key examples, and you related your presentation to course content. So I'm looking to hear from Shirley, the comparison of the 3 course texts, and also, to expand on the discussion that Rosalind just gave on the Black woman and education. Shirley, you have the floor.
Thank you. So as Rosalind said, Black women have faced issues in fighting for their education, but they also fought for their rights and careers. Women specifically have gone through many issues because they were seen as less and not as capable as men. Black women, however, have to fight their way because of being a woman and then because of their skin color. We were able to look at all 3 texts and found how women were treated so differently in the work field and in education. They were seen as inferior in all 3 books. In the book Generation X, you see women were changed in post-colonial times. Post-colonial times, they were getting the stereotype of being housewives. And this is where it began that women were only good at household things, such as like cleaning, taking care of kids, cooking, because the men were the ones who went out and did the heavy work, because women were like so stuck to the stereotype of being housewives. Sorry. And then in the book Woman, Race, and Class by Angela Davis, she was able to kind of show the fight that Black women were trying to put up and getting their right in careers and trying to get things such as like equal pay or getting their jobs that are like heavier. Sorry. Susan B. Anthony was one of the few like feminists that was actively taking action and protesting against the suffrage that Black women were facing and being put through. She was the voice for many people during that time.
Go ahead. Good job so far.
Sorry. I'm just trying to get back to my place. Oh, yeah. So then Black women also were like frowned upon, and they were rejected from any type of, whenever they were trying to have a say in what they feel like was right for them, they were always rejected and taken aback from like what they had a right to. White people specifically always felt like they were invisible. They shouldn't have been like speaking against this because it wasn't their right, because they were Black women. Today, there are many issues. After Susan B. Anthony and many other feminists, there are still many issues today in the workplace, such as pay gap, but more issues such as sexual harassment, lack of training to get the right education, not being taken serious because of that stereotype of not being as strong. Women always face this issue a lot more today, but it's more Black people because now white women have that power because they are white. Before it was like white women and Black women were facing these issues, but now it's just Black women that are facing the issues, sadly. In the book Ain't I a Woman by Bell Hooks, she describes a lot of sexism and the way that women are not superior in any way. She said the Black female slave was not as valued as the Black male slave. On average, it cost more money to buy a male slave than a female slave. And that was able to just show that even like back then, Black females were not valued as much. Sorry.
You can both round up now.
Okay. Sorry. So just to round it all up together, Black women still go through these like difficulties today, and there seems to be no change. And I feel like the change will happen when generations start breaking those generational curses of like Black women can't do nothing or women can't do nothing. I think it's all in society, and being able to change that matter. And Black women have to sadly keep fighting every day to be heard and respected, just because they're just as capable as the next white person or the next woman. And yeah.
Rosalind, do you have anything else to add?
No.
All right, thank you so much. Let's show our appreciation for the first set of presenters. Now I'm going to invite Dainik to make their presentation, and it's going to be on the history of Black women's education. And please keep checking the chat and posting each group that is going next. If you want to see the complete list, is on the announcement page on Blackboard for week 12. And also I've posted in the chat, I don't know, depending on if you just joined us. If you were here earlier, you should be able to see, but I'll keep posting the group names periodically. But for now, let us welcome Dainik on the history of the Black woman's education.
Hello.
Hello.
So, yes, so my topic was on the history of Black women's education. I'm sorry, do you like hear my AC? Is it like too loud?
No.
Okay.
I can hear you.
All right, okay. So yes. So basically, when talking about Black women's education, Black women trying to obtain their rights to education was something that it required a lot of sacrifices. In my essay, I mentioned the story of Ruby Bridges because I feel like that's like the main story that people think of when thinking about what Black women had to endure trying to obtain a proper education. If I pause, I'm just trying to like collect my thoughts.
Well, it's counting against your time limit and your preparedness for this presentation.
Sorry.
All right. So breathe in and out. Take your time, but not all the time in the world. And this goes for everybody. Don't be nervous. It's the same set of students and the same professor that you have all the time. All right.
The reason why it's important to acknowledge stories like Ruby Bridges because like it has a lot to do with Black feminism, and the importance of feminism is something that it's not really talked about a lot, because in both African and American societies, like were not seen as, women were not really seen as equal to like men. Like men before even women were able to receive their own education, like men always got more rights than women in history, um because of how they were viewed. And so the reason why so much sacrifice went towards the education, and like Ruby Bridges' story is important, is because education is like, it's how like people grow, is how people learn, and like I think education is important. Um, it also helps people like figure out who they are. So if education is like stripped from Black women, it could be very like detrimental. So as we all know, or we all should know, the story of Ruby Bridges was about she was a little African American girl in an American society, which at the time, like around this is around like 1960 something, um, they didn't, most white people didn't see them as equal. This is also around the time like schools were starting to get segregated. They weren't fully segregated though, like they were starting to. Before Ruby even got into this school, she had to take a test that all the other kids took, and she passed the test. So she was more than qualified to get into the school. But the ignorance of the white people in her town, they would like throw stuff at her while she's walking to school. She had to get escorted by security, and she had to do this like this is on her first day at the school. She had to endure this almost every day. And like even like the parents inside of her school would take they would take their children out of her class because they didn't want to share a class with a Black girl. And like imagine like a little, she was like I think 7 or 6. Like a 6-year-old has to deal with ignorance from parents, ignorance from teachers, and just ignorance from adults in general. And she had to overcome that at only 6, 7 years old. I compared this story to the Ain't I a Woman? Ain't I a Woman by Serge Sor. Hold on. I don't know how to pronounce her name. It's like Sojourner Truth. And in that book, basically, it talks about like the struggles that women had to go through dealing with sexism and racism, and how like usually that most of that stems from the ignorance of white men, and that narrative that Black women are inferior to them. I related to that because during the women's suffrage movement, the same Black women had to deal with the ignorance of the people in their town, and ignoring all of that, they still fought for what they thought was, for what they knew was important to them. Just like how Ruby still went to the school because education was important to her. I also related it to the Generation X book because that book talks about like the women in having to deal with the societal changes that were made and how they were seen as inferior. And it also talks about the capability of Black women. I related to that because Ruby was capable of getting into the school as well, just like the other kids there. So
You
yeah.
can round up in 1 minute.
Okay. Basically, what Ruby Bridges endured is something that should be recognized because Black women in American society and African society, they had to overcome a lot. And it's important to recognize this because the ignorance, like in the 1960s, will just continue if we don't learn about these situations. So, yeah.
Very good presentation. One note of correction. Go review the author of the Ain't I a Woman textbook. It's one of the course texts from the course. You know, there may have been mention of Sojourner Truth in it, but I want you to go back on Blackboard and find out who the author is, because we've been using the textbook from the beginning of the semester. All right, so let's show our appreciation for his presentation. Next, we have Khadija, Miriam, and I don't know if Masus. And their presentation is on women in traditional African society. Cameras on, please, if you're making a presentation. I see Khadija. I see Miriam and Jana. Is it Jana or Jana?
It's Jana.
Okay. All right. Sorry for mispronouncing your name. All right. So you have 15 minutes.
Okay, so I'm gonna start.
Okay.
We actually did week 7, African women, feminism, and liberation. I don't know why it says the other thing. But
yeah, it's okay. I think you initially posted that. So
okay.
So your topic is on the Blackboard discussion for week 7.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so basically, week 7 it talked about pre-colonial Africa and women in pre-colonial Africa as well, and it basically said that, like, how you say it? Women were basically treated better than in pre-colonial Africa than they're treating now. There were women who were kings, women who fought in wars. Women were basically kind of like the head of the household, and they contributed a lot to society. Like, they contributed in politics, they contributed in the economy because they were also traders and marketers. Basically, women kind of ran back then, and they were like almost on the same level or even higher than men, which is different than today's society. Also, since women also fought against colonization, and after colonization, that kind of shifted everything, and it kind of shifted the way women were seen. All right, so yeah. I can't hear you.
Are you still speaking, Khadija?
No.
Oh, Jana. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I wrote about how, like, during the colonial era, where like women were the alpha, and like men would have to like listen to them and like listen to their rules. Hold on. Also, I said like how women were able to do things for themselves and still had to follow certain ideas. One of the ideas were family planning and
basically they were making sure that the number of children that were being born was under control, and kept things like child spacing and keeping their virginity to themselves and breastfeeding and stuff like that. Like African women, like they didn't really have that much equality. They still had to play their role of like certain things, and like they did not have like fully access to resources. Hold on. They also like, hold on. And like some like African society, like women had to protect the male authorities because the women were highly favored and they were able to be more than just motherly figures. They were able to be like queens and like queens mostly before the colonialism. And yeah.
Okay, so for me, I kind of read about I wrote about how women they was trying to power and be as equal as men because and even sometimes they were trying to be superior. Um and that like sometimes especially black women they was like mostly seen as like men in a way because they was expected to be like field workers and stuff like that. And then but compared to like white women they weren't. So there was like a very back then there was a very big difference between black women and white women. So white women were most likely like seen as um like what's it called, give me a second, they were mostly seen as like housewives and basically like providing for the family and stuff like that. But the black women were mostly seen as like field workers. They just like provide for the baby, but they don't really like they wasn't really seen as like human in a way, which is kind of sad and stuff like that. So slavery kind of made it worse because even during like their pregnancy, like black women they was not getting treated the same way at all. Even nowadays, even today, so this day, black women have to like we have to go to a hospital that people actually like us. It's kind of sad because like you don't want to get hospitalized by somebody that's white because you're scared that something is gonna happen to your baby or things as such and stuff like that. So around the 1960s, there was this liberation movement, which was kind of like today's word for what is it called? Like the how women, the empowerment stuff like that. So also, give me one second. Mm, Also, in the book, Ain't I a Woman by Bell Hooks, um, they was talking about how black women was being oppressed and that we weren't treated the same way. They also talk about sexism, which was very a big thing back then because women in general, not only black women, sexism was a big thing. They didn't have any rights and they wasn't allowed to do such things as like vote and things like that. So it was very hard for them. Um, also in the, also in the book that we supposed to read for class, the Generation X, they talk about leadership a lot and how like nowadays like the 21st, like the women in 21st century, like we have like it's like a way of us, like it's easier for us to like take control and be able to control, like have capability of controlling like a room and stuff like that because of how we grew up. So it's like nowadays the way we see things is different from how like our parents saw it because now we're most likely to speak up than how back then our parents really wasn't really allowed to speak up or else something would have happened to them like slavery and stuff like that. So yeah.
So please, the three of you, before you round up, I want you to provide more examples by relating it to course content for week 7 that you have
Yeah.
selected for your topic. and some of the, you know, related to some of the learning resources, or expand on the discussion from the 3 course text. And my apologies, you can hear a lot of bells.
You don't know some Nigerian woman like this. Which kind of lecturer be this?
Yes, go ahead, group
Okay.
7.
Some pre-colonial women were often looked at as like down, and like they weren't like, they were basically suppressed, but in actuality they were more involved and more, I guess, higher than European women, and those were the women who are mainly putting them down. And also in like the Western countries like America and stuff, during that time women weren't even allowed to vote, but in Africa women were involved in politics. They were involved in like many different things that other women in the different like hemispheres weren't allowed to do.
All right. So thank you so much, group 7, on your presentation. Please, for those just joining us because you're joining from Nigeria, if you have any comments, reserve it until the end of the presentations. Thank you very much. Let's show our appreciation to group 7. Now we're going to go to group 8, and the title of the presentation for group 8 is The Truth About the Female Slavery and the Contributions of the Black Woman. We're going to hear from Kayla and Kiera. Kayla and Kiera, are you here? I see Kayla.
Yes, we're here.
Okay. All right. So your cameras on, please. And we have 2 people in this group on the truth about the female slavery and the contributions of the Black woman. All right, you have 10 minutes.
Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to say that I'm going to talk about is going to be the mammy character, because it was an anti-Black imagery, and basically said the whole entire purpose of our research paper was to talk about the myths and stereotypes of Black women and kind of debunk them by providing the truth, by providing Black women contributions to kind of, denounce those stereotypes. So anyway, to begin with the mammy caricature, just in case anybody doesn't know what that is, it's basically just a stereotype of a large matronly figure, Black woman who seems very happy, and she,
All right, Kayla and Kiera, please go ahead.
okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so basically it was a Black matronly figure, and she was basically characterized as a Black woman who was very happy with caring for the white family. And it was a stereotype made up by white America to basically cover up the horrific experiences of female slaves. Because when females were slaves, the white slave masters would basically rape women, and they would abuse them and just be very, very, very horrible to them. And this mammy was basically a way to facilitate the fact that, some female slaves were content with being, caring for the white family. So, for instance, according to Ferris State University, the mammy caricature, it says, the mammy character in all caricatures is contained a little truth surrounded by a larger lie. The caricature portrayed an obese, coarse maternal figure. She had great love for her white family, but often treated her own family with disdain. Even though she had many children, sometimes she was completely desexualized. So, as the title of the article suggests, the mammy caricature was an anti-Black portrayal of the Black woman. That fact in itself already exposes the dishonesty of white America during the slave trade and the Jim Crow era. Additionally, the evidence provided states that the mammy was devoted to the white family and she exhibited disdain against her own family. This fact represents another flaw with the Mammy caricature because African Americans as a whole were looked down upon. African American slaves were sold around like cattle, so it's possible that this portrayal of the quote unquote mammy was actually a female slave that was forced into the role of the matriarch for the household. To support this, African American women were used for their fertility through rape and forced to be wet nurses for the white woman. According to NovanHealth.org, Page Legend states, enslaved Black women were forced to serve as wet nurses for their master's wife. This evidence supports the fact that Black women didn't have any autonomy or choice with their own bodies, and that as a result, put their own children at risk. The article concerning the Mammy caricature claims that the Mammy expressed disdain towards her own family, but based on Dr. McGuire's article, Black Breastfeeding After a History of Trauma, she says that a lot of Black babies died during slavery because they weren't breastfed. They were fed concoctions of dirty water and cow's milk. This evidence adds additional proof to the fact that Black women didn't even have the opportunity to exhibit disdain towards their own families. Black women were caught up being robbed of their own nutritional breast milk for white babies instead of their own, while their Black babies were being killed at the hands of Black slave masters. So that whole thing just goes to show how white America has kind of tried to damage the image of the Black woman by trying to say that they were happy caring for the white family and that they basically hated their own family, when in reality, they didn't even have a chance to be a family. Their family was being killed while they were busy caring for white children, and their babies were kind of just being killed off. So they never had a chance to kind of build any connection with their own family. But white America has kind of concealed that by trying to make it seem as though they just disregard their own family for them when that's not the case. So then, additionally, there's a notion concerning the Black rapist, or a Black man that is portrayed as a rapist to white women. And basically this is another false claim to kind of facilitate the fact that Black men are damage the image of Black African Americans in general, not just Black women, Black men, but all the genders together. So the myth of the Black rapist of the white woman is twin of the myth of the bad Black woman. They are both designed to apologize for and facilitate the continued exploitation of Black men and women. To protect the white image and to further damage the Black image, Black men were convicted more frequently of raping white women and were less likely to be released from prison if they were falsely convicted. Though this particular issue isn't discussing the woman, it connects with rape that Black men faced during the slave era because it shows the matriculation of racism into current events. To add on, Black women were the target of rape during the slave trade era. This was because sexual coercion was rather an essential dimension of the social relations between slave master and slave. In other words, the rights claimed by slave owners and their agents over the bodies of female slaves was a direct expression of their presumed property rights over Black people as a whole. This evidence shows further proof that Black women were seen as property rather than people. Not only did female slaves have to suffer the abuse from their own, had to suffer abuse from the owners as well. According to Women in Resistance by Harmony Turnbull, she says slave women who rejected the planters' advances were often raped, flogged, or both. Punishment of this nature would be up to the whim of the master. Planters had wives, and these women would have severe animosity when such encounters occurred, whether willing or forced. So this is another flaw that is exhibited in this evidence by showing the utter disregard for humanity. Instead of criticizing slave owners or men in general for rape, white women completely disregarded morals by becoming jealous and violent. Then this also kind of debunks the notion that Black women are aggressive, because in reality, back in the slave trade era and like Jim Crow times, white women were more aggressive than women, because when Black women would get abused and raped by slave masters, white women would take it out on the Black female slaves by becoming just jealous of them and beating them to death and just being, engaging in these grotesque occurrences with Black women. So now I'm going to turn this over to Kiara, who is going to discuss the concept of Black women that is kind of going to further support by evidence against white women, the Black female slave struggle.
Thank you very much, Kayla. Kara, you have the floor.
Okay, so basically what I wrote about is women held enough power to be able to contribute large amounts of benefits to society, especially in African societies. Many things were dependent, like situations, people were dependent on women for success in life. Because of this, women played a key role in education and teaching of children social, ethical, and moral values, as stated in Power in Womanhood in Africa by SVC. And although women were mostly seen as maternal figures, there is more to it than just the role of taking care of just their families. And gender inequality didn't really play a role when it came to men doing things in society. So basically, women were able to do a lot of different things. So and it wasn't really necessarily looked at when they did things as a woman. It just was, as long as things were getting done to be able to meet goals in society, that's all that really mattered. So one of the first contributions of women, as stated by Furthermore Leaf, is that communities depended on them to provide nourishment. So because women had a great amount of knowledge about the environment, people in their societies counted them for food stability. And without food stability, they would starve, they would have starved. And women also knew about types of herbs and remedies that ensured the survival of their communities as well. African women were able to pass down this knowledge to the next generation to continue the cycle. So like even now in the present time, I definitely think that my mother has definitely instilled some of her knowledge into me that I will probably instill into my children if I have any. And with knowing about the vital things that they know, about the knowledge they have, women were able to be held on a pedestal. And one of the key points that I thought was really important was how it was said that women were treated with unparalleled respect because they were seen to be closer to the creator than men have ever had the potential to be. And this was the most important piece of information when understanding just how much women's contributions were appreciated, because women were able to produce life, that was something that was seen as the most influential because it simply allowed societies to grow. So one woman in particular that I also discussed was Madame Tinubu of Abeokuta Kata. Not sure if I'm saying that right. She had learned, as Foster states, valuable market skills from her grandmother, Aunt Sula, who traded in tree bark, roots, herbs, and leaves, and business skills from her mother, Najid, who had been a food seller. With this passed down knowledge, she was able to do things to make a living. As time went on, she continued to expand her trade, which helped her increase her wealth. And with this wealth, she, as stated, invested in the where she was living at the time, Lagos business district, and she had gained enough to be able to help gain control of alliances with certain powerful leaders. So, and also a slave that I would like to talk about as well, like going back to what Kayla said about the mistreatment. A woman named Elizabeth Freeman, she was a slave, and she also was sustained injuries from being in slavery, one of which was by a white woman who had used a hot shovel on her, which caused her scars. And basically she was able to decide that she had had enough and was able to sue in the state of Massachusetts and was able to become free, get freedom. And her contribution was basically that in Massachusetts, slavery was now unconstitutional. So overall, in conclusion, I would like to say the struggles and the truth of female slavery has become the fuel for most activism today. The false narratives placed on Black women have only strengthened the desire to protect the African-American image. To protect the African-American image, we must review and point out the contributions of Black women during the pre-colonial and slave trade era. The purpose of colonialism was not only to steal and rob Africans of their culture, traditions, and knowledge. The purpose of colonialism was to also destroy the African Americans as a whole to excel the image of themselves. However, there is proof that proves the importance of African women instead of simply complying with negative perspectives. Black women for centuries had to go through rough challenges to survive. Regardless of whether or not it is taken into account, Black women are the foundation of America. They were exploited because they were seen as property. Black women had an immense amount of value to offer, which is why they were robbed of it. If they were entirely useless, as Europeans suggest, they wouldn't have served as mammies, slaves, or wet nurses for the white women. Black women possessed knowledge, strength, and wisdom that their white counterparts lacked. And as a result of this, white America was threatened. And that is all.
Thank you very much, Kiera. That was a good presentation by both you and Kayla on the truth about the female slavery and contributions of Black women. Let's show our appreciation by giving them a round of applause. And you can mute yourselves, please, if you're just joining us. Last but not the least, we have Adrian Owusu, and her topic is women in traditional African societies. Adrian, you have the floor. Are you here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, I said her.
Yeah. For some reason, my camera isn't working. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, I can see a space there. Do you want to stay in front of your camera, in front of the computer?
Yeah, but I don't think you'll be able to see me though.
Wave, let me see.
Yeah, can you see me?
Wave in front of the screen.
Can you see me?
I can hear you. All right.
Okay.
Go ahead with your presentation. And then
Okay.
after Adrian's presentation, we're going to open the floor for comments and discussion. Yes, Adrian, you have the floor.
Okay. So my topic was women in traditional African society, and for the most part, women were basically treated equal as to men. They had equal leadership roles as men. And I don't know, someone's speaking.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm removing the person.
All right. So they basically had the same leadership roles as men, and gender wasn't really like a factor when it came to like picking roles. It was basically more or less on experience and the skills that an individual had during that time. So women really had a lot of political leadership roles at that time too. And some people in that era, like Nigerian women, they had their own support groups, and those support groups like they helped other women hold leadership roles. And because they were so powerful in politics, they were able to like govern their own day-to-day lives, and they didn't really have to worry about like male dominance or like being controlled by men in the community. But and also Queen Mothers of Ghana, they were also seen as like support groups too, and they could oversee like the political aspects of the community as well. And they also had the same power as the chief of Ghana, and they were also at some point they were also able to choose who could be chief, and if the chief was out of line, they could also step in and try to fix it. And then when once colonization came into the picture, women basically lost like all of the leadership roles that they worked up so hard for. And so women didn't really go out with without a fight. And it says in the book Generation X, like Nigerian women, they came up with a lot of radical, but like it was with a purpose. They came up with a lot of ideas to fight back against inequality. So one of them was they would actually walk naked to the community palace and show authorities like they're not going to stand for this inequality and sexism. So this is like a really big thing about Black feminism as well. And then I think overall today, like we're all women in Africa, and even here today, I think women today are still fighting for that like equality amongst gender. But I feel like women in traditional Africa, they were more respected and had more power in their community.
All right. Relate the presentation you've made to course content and also the 3 course texts. And then you can use that as your roundup for the presentation.
So I think like women in like traditional Africa, like it relates to all of the 3 books and the courses. And I Ain't I a Woman, it talks more or less like on like women liberation and like fighting against gender inequality. And so I think like even back then, like around traditional Africa, they've been fighting for just equal rights and just like having the same power as men, because when colonization happened, they were basically like suppressed, and they were lacking power basically because they were seen as the weaker gender.
All right, thank you so much, Adrian. Let's show our appreciation for his presentation on traditional African societies, women in traditional African societies. Well, we've come to the last presenter for this topic, and I'm going to welcome first and foremost students and faculty from the Obafemi Awolowo University located in Nigeria, West Africa. We're very fortunate to have you join us today. It's a surprise. I was expecting you in the next class on cultural diversity. So, I'm very grateful that Professor Adebusuyi, challenged you to arrive early, and you have met us on the last day of the student presentation on women in Africa and the diaspora, looking at the contributions of Black women in Africa, examining gender inequality and equality in Africa and in the Americas, and also looking at the expressions of Black feminism and Black women's struggles in the United States and in the Caribbean. So I welcome you for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, please use the raise hand feature. I know that Miss Oyindamola raised her hand. I'm not sure if it's Miss Oyindamola. Let me see. I know there was someone that had raised their hand earlier, and I posted a comment that we should wait until all the students have finished their presentations. Well, if you have any questions or comments for any of the student presenters from York College, the City University of New York, please unmute your mic and ask your question or provide us with your comments. Thank you. Any questions regarding any of the presentations or any comments? Well, I'm going to put Professor Adebusuyi on the spot, since he invited his class and his colleagues. Professor, you can unmute yourself. Please give us your overall view or comment on the presentations that have been made today on Black women in Africa and the diaspora, examining the struggles of Black women, and also looking at gender inequality and Black women's struggle and liberation in the Americas. Professor Adebusuyi, are you there? Does anyone have any comments? Any questions from the guests joining us from Obafemi Awolowo University in Nigeria? Okay, no comments or questions, but we sincerely appreciate that you joined us today. I'm going to turn over to my students at York College, City University of New York. You all did very well with your presentations, and I was very impressed that, many of you were able to grasp the course content and relate your presentations to course content for the specific week that you selected to make your presentations on. I was also very impressed that you were able to relate the 3 course texts, and factor the content into your presentation, also providing real world or real life historical evidence and also current day, information on the effect of globalization and the Black woman. So let's give each other a warm round of applause. Thank you very, very much. I was very impressed. So I hope that you've all turned in your paper. They were due yesterday by 11:30 p.m. If you've not turned in your group or individual paper, please, you have until 11:30 p.m. tonight. After tonight, the group paperwork will not be accepted for the BLST 103 Fall 2022 class. If you have any questions, you can hang around. We will start another session at 3:30 p.m., but this time on cultural diversity, looking at complex societies. And we're going to have a guest speaker from the Obafemi Awolowo University in Nigeria joining us. Already a lot of, students and faculty have joined us early, so we sincerely appreciate them. Before you all log off, I mean my students from CUNY, can you unmute yourselves and put your cameras on, and let's welcome our guests joining us, or our guests that have joined us from Nigeria. Let's give a minute for the videos or the cameras to come on. So let's unmute and say hello to our guests. And our guests, please feel free to put your cameras on. Yes, from York College students. And OAU students, put your cameras on and unmute yourself and feel free to say hello.
Hello.
Or feel free to post in the chat. All right, my students from York College are saying hello to you.
Hello.
Many of them have
guys.
put on their cameras.
Joseph. Hello. I'll get fine.
All right, so I'm going to stop the recording and we can hang on for a few minutes, for any exchanges or interactions. Thank you very much, everybody, for your group presentation for the Black Women in Africa and the Americas content. Thank you so much.
Allow me to find